Hey there, it's Huang with Hand Therapy Secrets. You know, I normally go on and do an Instagram live every Monday. And yesterday I found myself out of the office and I wanted to still show up for you guys. And you know, I had a little trouble with my phone. So normally I do it on my phone and my phone overheated because my car was hot. So anyway, the whole thing got deleted, but I had some great questions and I had some answers to them, and I want to make sure that I answer those questions for you. So I'm doing a YouTube video. So here are some questions. We had some great questions on making custom fitted orthosis. We had some great questions about therapy in general, and I wanted to make sure I come on and answer these questions for you. So one of them was finding the right strapping for a digit-based dorsal extension orthosis that doesn't lag, right? So let's say you're doing a short dorsal block orthosis and you are trying to get MPs into flexion, but the IPs into extension. So normally, where's my pen? So normally what happens is when you come around over the edge, if you go a little too low down here, then what happens is the strapping won't hold the fingers into extension. So normally one of the things that I do is I make sure that the circumferential part of the the part that comes down around the finger doesn't go too far low. It actually ends right halfway. It's the circumference of that finger, whether it be on the index side. So you just don't want it to come and have too much of a deep ledge. You want your ledge to be a little bit more shallow, because then when you do a little bit more shallow, then the strap has the ability to hold in a little bit stronger because the splint material isn't there to block it. The other thing that I normally do is I like to use loop. So you have hook, which is the rough part, and usually I use adhesive hook, and that's what sticks to the splint. And then I use the hook, which is the soft fuzzy part. No, the loop, which is the soft fuzzy part that attaches to the hook. And I'll use the loop because it's stronger, it doesn't give, and it can hold in a little bit longer. Normally I use 1 inch, and then for finger stuff, I'll just trim the edges, so then it becomes, or I'll just cut it down the middle and it becomes 1/2 inch. So then it fits around the finger better. But I tend to use a loop when I need something of a little bit firmer strap. And then I'll use like a soft strap for anything that like needs to go around a little bit more sensitive area. And those are the things that I normally use in terms of strapping. I try not to use the really foamy straps. They fall apart, and it's not cost effective because they keep falling apart and patients keep wanting more straps, and it gets expensive when they only get paid. You only get paid for that one custom fitted orthosis. You don't get paid for every single time they're asking for straps. So, and they fall apart too easily. So I tend not to use soft strap, like foamy soft straps, for those reasons. Great question. So there was another question when it comes to making splints. So one was about the Munster splint, and one was about dynamic extension splints. So which part did you guys want me to go over? The more specific you can get with the question, sometimes I can be a little bit more specific. When it comes to Munster splints, the whole purpose of a Munster splint, or sometimes it's called a sugar tong splint, is that it's going to immobilize wrists and it's going to immobilize supination, pronation. So it's got to go distal past the wrist and proximal past the elbow. Now, one of the things, then there's like a ton of different types of patterns that you can use. That's one of the reasons why in my Orthosis 101 class, I teach the wrist support splint, because once you know how to make a custom wrist support and you know how to make it really well, you can turn that into just about any kind of like splint. There's so many different. I actually just did a thumb extension volar thumb extension orthosis for a tendon transfer surgery, and it's the same pattern, only a little bit different, just maybe a little bit bigger in certain parts. Maybe it went a little bit higher to cover, so your molding of it is a little different, but the pattern is still the same. And so if you have that same pattern, then you would just you can tweak it a little bit so that it goes a little bit higher and it covers and stops the forearm. So you got to block the forearm essentially from being able to turn up and down, but you can allow flexion extension. So there's a couple of different patterns for that. When it comes to making any kind of dynamic orthosis, static progressive orthosis, the most important thing when it comes to it is the material. The material's got to stick together. So test out your material, put them together, put a piece of metal in between, and see if once you connect it, once you heat it up, do the materials really bond together. I tend to like to use materials that really bond together versus using like a glue. I used to work at a hospital, and when we used to use a glue, it got so messy. Every time you tried to use a glue, the fucking glue was like hard as a rock. It's just like opening a super glue, right? If you don't use it, it's gonna dry up and then you have to get a new bottle. So I tend to use materials that stick well together. And then when it comes to static progressives or dynamics, it's all about, you wanna have an overview to look from the top down so that you can look at alignment. And those are the two really most important things about dynamic or static progressive types of extension splint. So I hope that helps, but Orthosis 101 is going to open pretty soon. So if you are someone who's not really comfortable making orthosis, then definitely keep an eye out for it. You can always sign up to my email list, and that way whenever I am opening a course or anything like that, or opening a program, you guys know all about it. But if you are a lot more advanced, like already making static progressives and stuff like that, then if you need any help, just let me know. Just ask a little bit more specific questions. Maybe I can answer them a little bit better based on what you need. Okay. Let's see, what was another question? Digit stiffness. Oh my gosh, digit stiffness is the dream of all therapists, right? All hand therapists, right? It's like you want them because they're great cases, but at the same time, they're really frustrating. So it's like the nemesis of all hand therapists. So the most important thing when it comes to joint stiffness is you've got to look at the overall picture. Is it a joint problem? Is it a skin problem, scarring problem? Is it a ligament muscle type of issue? There's, I wrote down skin, this is what I do as my staff, is it a joint problem? Is it a skin problem? Is it a tendon problem? Is it a scarring problem? What kind of imbalance is there? You've got to rule in and rule out things. In all of hand therapy, it's ruling in and ruling out, and that's it. And then from there, you can take it a step further. Now, what do I need to do with it? Now, saying that, you've got to also know when to call it quits, right? You've got to know when to call it quits. So it's not a failure on your part. I promise. There are some injuries that you just know that you've been working on in a certain way, and at some point you're like, I've done this, and there's a real problem. So as a hand therapist, you need to become the problem solver and the decision maker so that you're not beating your head against the wall, and neither is your patient, So if at some point you've got to make that decision, hey doc, or hey patient, we're not getting anywhere with this joint, with this finger, with this problem. We need to talk about another procedure potentially, right? So that is part of being a great hand therapist, is being able to solve the problem, make a decision on that. Now, I've written a book all about avoiding surgery, but there are some injuries that you just can't avoid. Some injuries are really bad. You have to then say, okay, I'm not getting anywhere with this. I do this all the time. Hey doc, this is if you've seen my stories, you've seen some of the injuries that we have, at some point I have to say, hey doc, hey patient, we're not making the kind of progress that I'm hoping for us to make here. The next best decision is to get yourself ready for the next procedure. What are we going to do next? And what's the plan to do next after that surgery? It's really, really huge so that they can get the best outcome. But when it comes to stiff fingers, there's like 1,000,001 ways to do something with it. So just keep that in mind though. Rule in and rule out. What are you doing? What are you not doing? Okay, so this is a great question too, tightness. Why do people feel really tight when they're so hypermobile? I have this exact same problem. So I have a tendency to be hypermobile. I can actually touch my thumb to my forearm. My fingers go really far back. My elbows are, they go really far back as well as my knees. And what happens is, if you think about, you have your joint, right? And what holds the joint together? You have your ligaments and your capsule. Everything kind of holds it together, right? Those things move, but they don't move that much. And then you have your muscles. Muscles get long, muscles get short, muscles get long, and they get short, and they move the joint. And what happens in people who are hypermobile is that their ligaments don't hold them together that well. There's a certain amount of movement, but it's too stretchy. It's like, think of a rubber band. It's like, it's supposed to be tight, but this rubber band in particular is a little too loose. And so what it relies on are muscles, right? So it relies on the muscles being really strong so they can hold everything together. That's how your joints are held together. It's like ligaments, capsules, and then the muscles. And then in all of our joints, essentially, it's going to move one direction a little bit better than the other. So if you're really kind of hypermobile, those ligaments and those muscles aren't, like the ligaments aren't really tight enough. So you're relying on your muscles. So imagine your muscles saying, oh my God, I can't hold on, because it's trying so hard to hold your joints together. So people who are hypermobile tend to feel really stiff and they want to stretch, but really a lot of it's just imbalance because they're not strong enough in very specific directions. So you find out where the imbalances are, you strengthen them in a certain way, and those muscles will hold those joints better. I know. I have the same exact problem. I used to, I feel stiff all the time in certain areas, but it's not so much that I'm stiff because I have like so much motion. It's just, I might be stiff in a very particular area, but if I get really strong in particular muscles, then it's gonna take away that quote unquote stiffness. I hope that helps. So I have two more questions. One is the mallet fingers. So when it comes to mallet fingers, what is it with the mallet fingers? You know that they're really hard. You know that it's the terminal tendon, and that little tendon doesn't want to do shit, The biggest problem with mallet fingers, and I talk about this with my own team, is, and I have this problem too, is that it's boring as shit. It's boring, it's one tendon, it's one little joint, and you can't do anything. You can't do anything. It's supposed to be immobilized. So the whole point is like you're trying to make that one knuckle straight and you're trying to prevent the other knuckle from being stiff or developing a deformity. The biggest thing when it comes to mallet fingers is that you've got to set expectations. So not only are you setting expectations for your patient, but you're setting your own expectations. As soon as I get a mallet finger, I'm like, oh gosh, this is one of the hardest types of injuries that you could have, and you need to explain that to them, and you need to know that too. And it's okay if you can't get it all the way straight. Most mallet finger people come and they do have a little bit of a lag. You have to explain that a little bit of lag is okay. You just don't want a ton of lag, and again, it comes down to problem solving. What have you done? What have you tried? And when do you call it quits? Some people need a pinning. And when they've already had the pinning, then the most important thing is to not push it. You would rather than be a little stiffer than to have the finger just completely fall. Okay, so one of the biggest things with mallet fingers is it can get kind of boring, but it's okay. Not all things are created equal. Not all things can be like woohoo, fun and exciting. Sometimes the mallet fingers are really challenging, and it's because it's kind of boring for you. So that goes to my next question. And so this question is really, really big, right? Patients who don't understand exercises no matter how I try to explain it. So I can hear you. You're frustrated. Patients don't listen to you. They're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're not doing it right no matter how many times you tell them. You send them a picture. You explain to them over and over and over and over, and they come back and they're still not doing the same thing. Am I hearing you correctly? Because I have the same exact problem you do. And this is how I explain it to my own team, because they get really frustrated, like, man, keep telling them to do it this way and they keep doing it wrong. But you know what? Not all patients are created equal. They're not all people are created equal. Some people actually really get it and some people don't get it. So again, it comes down to your expectations, because they're not upset that they're not doing it right. They're upset that they still have pain, right? They're not upset that they're not doing the exercise or they're doing it wrong. They actually, so many of them don't know. So I think it takes a lot of patience on your part, and how you get patience is resetting your own expectations. Because they're not upset, they're not mad about it, they just want to get rid of the pain. So when you reset your expectations to like, okay, this person, I understand that this person doesn't get it. They might not have ever exercised a day in their life, and some people just don't know, they don't have a sense of awareness of their body because they've never had to. Our bodies move automatically. Arms go up, arms go down, you go to sleep, you get up, you walk, you use your hands, and there's not a problem until one day there is a problem. It's funny because my mom is one of those people. So my mother's never exercised a day in her life, right? So I used to get really frustrated with some patients that I would get when I was working in the hospital, and they just, like, no matter what you would do or say, they just didn't get it. So one day my mom's telling me, and she goes, she's sitting down, but she's like, your aunt told me that in order to get like a six-pack, to get stronger, I needed to do sit-ups. So do you know how she would do sit-ups? So imagine her sitting down, and then she goes, your aunt told me to do this. And then if I do that enough times, I would get a six-pack. And I was like, Mom, you're crazy. That's not how it works. You have to lay down and then you pull yourself up. So I made her lay down. I held her feet and I was like, okay, now pull yourself up. She couldn't do it. She started cracking up. I was like dying. I'm like, that's how you get a six-pack, Or one of the ways to get a six-pack, you have to exercise. It has to feel really hard. She's like, oh no, forget it. Well, guess what? When she got injured and it was her shoulder, she would do the exercise all wrong. And then, I'm doing her therapy and she would hit me. And she's like, oh no, don't do it that way, because not all people are created equal. Some people, you come in and they're like boom, boom, boom. And it's because they have a great sense of awareness. They have a great motivating factor, potentially. There are things that they love, or they just don't want to feel that way. But there's tons of people who just don't know how to move, and they've always moved automatically. They don't know how to do it any other way. So I think the best thing for you to do, the best thing to end your own frustration is to really understand that not all patients and not all people are created equal. And it's okay if they don't get it, because that has nothing to do with you. It doesn't make you a great therapist, doesn't make you a bad therapist, nothing. What makes you a great therapist is by you constantly showing up for them, even if they don't understand. And it's okay if it takes them a little bit longer, okay? So I hope that answers all your questions, and I will try not to overheat my phone the next time when I'm doing a live, so that I can make sure I can answer your questions. So until then, I'm gonna post this up on YouTube. So if you didn't watch this before, then obviously you're watching it now. And if you have questions about hand therapy, then go ahead and hit subscribe. You're gonna get more of my emails. You can follow me on Instagram and answer your questions there when I do Monday live videos. Just send me a question there and I'll be able to answer it. And of course, you can always sign up and join my email list, and so you get right into my inbox and I can get right into your inbox and answer all your questions for you. All right, until then, see you later.